A very good evening, aspirants. I welcome you all to editorial analysis of Shankar IAS Academy. Today's date is 24th of January 2025. Now, before getting into the list of articles, I have an important announcement for you. It is regarding UPSC mock interview 2024. Here you can see the mock interview dates starting from 27th to 30th, and the interview panel. Here you can see it. And with the registration link provided in the description, you can register for this particular mock interview and get yourself tested before the final interview. So with this note, let us look into the list of articles that we are going to discuss today. In this first article, we'll be discussing in detail about tuberculosis from the mains perspective, and in the second article, we'll be discussing about the recent policy changes after Mr. Donald Trump's presidency. So we'll be detailing seeing about India and US relations in this article discussion. So without any delay, let us get into the news article discussion. Now look at this article from The Hindu newspaper. As the title itself hints, this article talks about hashtag end tuberculosis and the progress made on that particular policy, and it highlights certain challenges and certain solutions to it. So what are all they? Let us see them one by one in this news article discussion. Before that, I have a mains question for you. Let me read out the question. Examine the impact of COVID-19 disruptions on India's progress towards the hashtag end TB targets and outline the policy interventions needed to strengthen the fight against tuberculosis. So it is a 15 marker question, and you can write answer for 250 words and post it in the comment section. This question has two important parts. First part, you have to write about the impact of COVID-19 on the progress, and in the second part, you can write about the policy interventions to adjust this disruption caused by the COVID-19. So you can write the answer and post it in the comment section so that we will be reviewing your answer. So with this, we shall start with the basics of tuberculosis. So tuberculosis is nothing but an infectious disease caused by a bacteria called Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So it is actually a double stranded DNA, which means it has a lot of impact and very effective when it causes a disease, and it can be transmitted very easily. In India, tuberculosis is a notifiable disease under Epidemic Disease Act 1897, which means any patient with tuberculosis must be reported to the government. And it is part of National Tuberculosis Elimination Program, in short called as NTEP. Now moving on, we shall see about the types of tuberculosis. See, there are three different types of tuberculosis. Each requires different kind of treatment. So the first one is the pulmonary TB. It affects lungs. It is the most common type, and certain symptoms includes cough, chest pain, blood in sputum, and etc. But when these tuberculosis bacteria, when they get transmitted through blood stream or the lymphocytic system and affecting the other organs, then we will be calling it as the extrapulmonary tuberculosis. So it affects other organs, for example, the lymph nodes, from which the immune system actually starts fighting against any pathogen. And then there is a kidney, and then there is kidney, spleen, and brain. And the symptoms actually varies depend upon the organ it is being affecting. And then we have the drug resistant tuberculosis. So we have a very big or a broader concept called AMR, antimicrobial resistance. So it is similar to that. We call this drug resistant tuberculosis when the type of tuberculosis is resistant to any kind of standard treatment. So it requires longer and complex treatment. So these three are the very important types of tuberculosis. Now here comes the question, why a larger emphasis has been given to this particular disease? This is because it actually affects persons with very low immunity. So a person with higher immunity, they even after exposure, they will be having inactive tuberculosis, meaning they will not suffer from tuberculosis symptoms, but after a longer period of time, their immune system might be depreciating. But when we talk about persons with very low immune system or micronutrient deficiency, then those kinds of person are very much vulnerable to tuberculosis. So this is why this tuberculosis is very closely related to poverty. So this poverty, what happens is, it actually a very big cycle. So when a person is get affected by tuberculosis, for the treatment itself, a lot of money will be spent. So this poverty will be actually worsened by this particular disease. And the second important thing is, when a person affected by tuberculosis is already in poverty, which means they will be living in a very congested area. So the transmission rate is enormous and huge, and that is why tuberculosis is very important to be contained at the very first note. Now, moving on, we shall look at the global and national targets when it comes to tuberculosis. See, India has fixed that it will eliminate tuberculosis by 2025, which is this year. So we have actually reduced tuberculosis instances by 80 percentage, and we have actually reduced tuberculosis death by 90 percentage, and we have eliminated any kind of catastrophic cost as well. And when we come to WHO, they have a fixed target, like they have to end this tuberculosis by 2035. So according to this plan also, 90 percentage of the instances has been reduced and 95 percentage of the deaths has been reduced. Now, moving on, we shall see about the challenges in TB control. See, the first thing is COVID-19 impact. So after COVID-19, a lot of service disruption has been happened, and this has led to widespread of transmission of this particular disease, and the resource diversion has also enormously impacted this particular tuberculosis control. And the second important thing is drug resistance. See, the emergence of this multi-drug resistant tuberculosis has limited the treatment options. So this has also led to the transmission of tuberculosis to a larger population. And we have healthcare access because there is a lot of barriers put by stigma and lack of awareness and even geographic limitations. So due to all these, people, especially the vulnerable people, they could not actually access the healthcare or the help provided by our government. And the fourth important thing is the financial constraint. There is insufficient resources, and there is a need for sustainable investment in this particular TB control. Moving on, we have supply chain disruption as well after this COVID-19. So this has led to shortage of diagnostic tools and medicines. Finally, we have constraints when it comes to diagnosing this EPTB. EPTB is nothing but the external pulmonary tuberculosis. So for that, we require like advanced diagnosis, for example, imaging and biopsy, which we don't have currently. So these are all certain challenges. Now, having seen about the challenges, let us quickly go through the solution or the suggestion. First thing is, we have to collaborate with local community people. A very good example for this is a case study is Kerala's model. They have actually collaborated with Kudumbashree. So Kudumbashree is nothing but a self-help group in Kerala. So they have initiated a lot of awareness campaigns, and they have helped out a lot of people who are very vulnerable, who does not have accessibility to healthcare when it comes to tuberculosis. So this has actually worked, and it has led to decline of tuberculosis in that particular state. And we have to promote a lot of decentralized labs. We have to bring in a lot of mobile units. So these mobile units can be placed at areas where there is very low accessibility. So this will improve accessibility and reduce the issue. And then we can bring in digital platforms, for example, the Nikshay Aushadi. See, this is actually a web portal. In this web portal, the tuberculosis disease treatment or the drugs will be notified. So those kinds of digital platforms can be encouraged a lot. And for this to happen, we have to bring in digital infrastructure. We have to strengthen our digital infrastructure, and we have to reduce the digital divide as well. And finally, we have to pitch in a lot of public awareness campaigns, and this will actually reduce stigma. See, there is actually a misconception that tuberculosis is very contagious, but people with higher immunity, even after exposure, they will not have symptoms of tuberculosis, which a lot of people don't understand. And tuberculosis is actually a preventable and curable disease. So instead of going for cure, they actually have a stigma that the person will eventually die, and they don't even seek for medical help. So those kinds of stigma are still there, and that is why we require a lot of awareness campaigns. So these are all very important facts that you have to remember when it comes to tuberculosis. So far we saw about tuberculosis, then its types, then we saw why tuberculosis is very important, especially in a country like India, and then we saw certain challenges in tuberculosis control and how it can be rectified. So with these learned points, now let us move on to the next news article discussion. Now look at this editorial article. This article talks about the recent changing global trade ecosystem after Mr. Donald Trump's ovation. So what happened recently is in the annual meet of World Economic Forum in Davos, Mr. Donald Trump has spoken about imposing tariffs on certain countries. So this tariff imposition is going to have a lot of impacts on the global trade ecosystem, and that is what this article is talking about. So let us see the important facts from the article one by one. Before that, I have a mains question for you. Let me read out the question. Assess the potential trade opportunities for India in the post-pandemic global economy. How can India leverage its strategic geographical location, digital infrastructure, and recent trade agreements to boost exports and attract foreign investment? So it is a 15 marker question for 250 words. You can write an answer and post it in the comment section so that we can review your answer. So here the first question is, what is this 100% tariff? See, 100% tariff is nothing but whatever kind of trade is happening, the profit will attract 100% of tax. So what happens is the person who is undergoing this particular trade will left out with no margin or no profit. So this kind of thing is nothing but protectionism. Protectionism is nothing but saving the domestic companies from the foreign competition. So this protectionism is highly promoted when it comes to Donald Trump's administration, and his administration always put forth this particular policy, which is America first. So what does this mean? US interest will be the foremost when it comes to trade or economical or any kind of economical thing. Now, this being one side, it is going to have a lot of impact in the global trade ecosystem, and India should actually be prepared for the policy changes. So, this is what the most important thing the article has been insisting. Now, we shall see about India and US trade relations. So, when we talk about the economic ties, India and US have bilateral trade reaching up to 120 billion in 2023 to 24 year. So we have recently signed the MOU or Memorandum of Understanding when it comes to critical minerals supply chain, and we have also used tariffs as a tool for leverage in negotiations. The article also highlights certain important approaches of India to trade agreements. For example, we have a very successful engagement when it comes to deals with UAE and Australia, but we have missed certain opportunities. For example, RCEP, which is a regional trade pact of Asia Pacific, and we have missed IPEF trade pillar, which is actually a US led regional economic initiative. So, by highlighting these examples, the article just suggests that India should keep in mind all the past trade pacts, and we have to make a move in future which is very high, which will highly benefit India's interest. However, there are certain challenges in achieving these kinds of trade pacts. Let us see them one by one. See, the first is the labor mobility. Here we have issue when it comes to trade agreements, especially with skilled labor movement provisions. And the host countries, they also resist. Why? Because of the job competition and the immigration concerns. And that is a very big challenge when it comes to balanced negotiation. We actually lack access to professional and reciprocal benefits. See, secondly, intellectual property rights. Many developed countries have very stricter intellectual property rights. For example, in if you take India's pharma sector, due to higher IPR, the cost implication are very high, which is actually hurting India's trade system. So we have to keep this in mind, and we have to act balance so that we can balance both the industrial protection as well as the global trade norms. Now, this is the second very big challenge. Now, moving on to the solutions to these challenges. See, the first important thing that we have to focus on is the strategic engagement, especially the bilateral agreement. See, just now I said about America First policy. So, in that America First policy, the US administration they tie up with certain countries. So India must be ready to tap such opportunities through bilateral agreements. This is the very first way forward that you have to remember. Second way forward is modernization. We have to bring in lot of modernization within the domestic industries to tolerate the competitiveness offered by the foreign companies. So this will help us not to miss large opportunities like RCEP and etc. And thirdly, we have to work on trade policy reforms. For example, we have to bring in a balanced tariff structure between the two countries. And finally, we have to focus on critical sectors. For example, the growing sectors like high tech manufacturing and digital infrastructure and green technologies. So they open a lot of arena of collaboration and cooperation. So these are all very important key way forwards for India to take up in the upcoming changing global trade ecosystem. So with this, we came to the end of the news article discussion. If you like the video, hit like, do comment, and don't forget to subscribe to Shankar IAS Academy YouTube channel. So thank you so much for listening.